Hey there, curious minds. Before we get started, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop it in the comments below. Forest, city, desert, mountain, wherever you are, welcome. Today, we're stepping into the world of trees. Not just the towering giants or the gentle saplings, but the hidden, whispering network beneath our feet that proves trees are never really alone. Ready to explore the forest's best-kept secrets? Let's begin. Imagine stepping into a forest. The light filters softly through the canopy overhead. You can hear the rustle of wind in the leaves, the distant call of birds, maybe even the quiet crackle of branches under your feet. It feels peaceful, still, maybe even silent. But that silence is deceiving. Because right now, all around you, something is happening. Something invisible. Something profound. The forest is alive with conversation, not in the way we're used to. No voices, no words, no sound waves dancing through the air. This is something slower, subtler, a different kind of language entirely. And it's not just happening above the ground. It's happening underneath your feet. Right now, as you stand there, hundreds of trees are sending messages back and forth through a complex and ancient network that we've only just begun to understand. If you've ever walked through a forest and felt a strange sense of presence, that the trees themselves are aware of you, you're not imagining it. Scientists now know that trees are in constant contact with each other, not just passively existing side by side, but actively engaging with one another. The forest is not a collection of individuals. It's a community. And like any strong community, it depends on communication. The first real clue came when researchers noticed something strange. Trees of the same species were growing in patterns that didn't make sense if they were competing for light, water, and nutrients. They weren't fighting each other. They were helping. One tree, strong and healthy, might be funneling nutrients underground to a weaker neighbor. A mother tree, an older, larger tree, might send carbon to her saplings, even if it costs her energy to do so. It was as if the forest was looking after its own. But how? How could a tree know where to send resources? How could it detect which trees were kin or sick or in need? The answer, it turns out, was in the soil and in the mushrooms. Underneath the forest floor lies a vast, interconnected web of fungal threads called mycorrhizae. These tiny, hair-like filaments stretch from tree root to tree root, forming symbiotic partnerships with nearly every tree species on Earth. The fungi receive sugars from the trees, the products of photosynthesis, and in return, they help the tree absorb water and nutrients from the soil. But this relationship is more than transactional. These mycorrhizal networks act like fiber optic cables, carrying chemical messages from tree to tree. Some scientists have started calling it the Wood Wide Web. Through this underground network, trees can alert each other to threats, like insect infestations or drought. They can recognize their own seedlings and preferentially nourish them. They can send excess resources to distant trees that are struggling. This isn't just random distribution, it's behavior. Purposeful, adaptive, intelligent behavior. In a way, it's like watching a slow-motion symphony play out over months and years. When one tree is attacked by pests, it can release distress signals through the mycorrhizal network. Neighboring trees detect the warning and begin producing bitter chemicals in their leaves to make themselves less appetizing. This happens too quickly for evolution alone to explain. It's a real-time response to real-time danger. Trees are actively sharing information. And this kind of intelligence isn't confined to a single species. Trees of different kinds, firs, birches, pines, have been seen communicating through the same networks. Sometimes they cooperate, sometimes they compete, but they are never isolated. Even dying trees don't disappear quietly. Before they fall, they will often dump their remaining resources, carbon, nitrogen, water, into the network, like a final gift to the forest. In death, they nourish life. Their molecules will find their way into new buds, new branches, new generations. All of this raises an astonishing idea. If trees are so intricately connected, then maybe we need to rethink how we see them. Not as background scenery, not as solitary pillars of wood, but as part of a living, breathing community, one that remembers, responds, and, in its own way, communicates. So, the next time you find yourself in the woods, try pausing, stand still, listen, not with your ears, but with your awareness. You may not hear a sound, but know that around you, just below the surface, a conversation is unfolding, one that's been going on for hundreds of millions of years. And you've just begun to listen. Of course. Here's a long-form, immersive continuation, expanding what would have been Chapter 2. This section builds on the wonder introduced earlier and takes the audience deeper into the hidden world beneath the forest floor. Like before, it flows naturally without headings or chapter markers. To truly understand how trees are never alone, we have to go beneath the surface, literally. Not just to the visible roots that curl through the soil like fingers searching for stability, but deeper. Down into a hidden realm that we often walk over without a second thought. It's here, in the darkness of the underground, that one of nature's most remarkable collaborations is taking place. And it changes everything we thought we knew about how forests function. At first glance, tree roots might look like simple tools, structural anchors, nutrient straws, water pipes, and yes, they do all those things. But they are also the entry point to an extraordinary subterranean network that rivals any technology humans have created. This network is made up of something microscopic and ancient. Fungi. Specifically, thin web-like structures called hyphae, the building blocks of a vast underground web known as the mycorrhizal network. The name might sound technical, but the concept is beautifully simple. The word mycorrhiza comes from Greek, mykes meaning fungus, and rhiza meaning root. A mycorrhiza is a symbiotic partnership between a plant root and a fungus. They've been evolving together for over 400 million years, long before flowers or birds or mammals ever appeared on Earth. The fungus attaches to the roots of the tree, forming a tight alliance. The tree provides sugars and carbohydrates produced through photosynthesis, and in exchange, the fungus extends the tree's reach, far beyond what its roots could accomplish alone. Fungal hyphae are impossibly fine, thinner than a single strand of human hair, yet they spread out over massive areas, creating a mesh of life that connects one tree's root system to another's, and another's, and another's, until entire forests are bound together in a web of silent, nutrient-rich threads. It's as though the forest has built its own internet, and every tree is a user logged on. These networks are not static. They are alive, responsive, and adaptable. As fungal hyphae spread, they form junctions, bridges, intersections, linking tree, to shrub, to flower. In some old-growth forests, a single cubic foot of soil might contain miles of these tiny fungal threads. each playing a role in transmitting information, sharing resources, or supporting a neighbor in need. What's especially incredible is that this network doesn't treat all trees equally. It distinguishes between them. Larger, older trees, sometimes called mother trees, have more extensive root systems and fungal connections. These mother trees serve as central hubs in the network. Through them, younger saplings receive not only nutrients, but also chemical signals, guidance, protection, even what some scientists cautiously refer to as memory. For example, if a sapling is struggling in the shade, a nearby mother tree might send it extra carbon to help it grow. If another tree is under attack by insects, it can use the network to warn its neighbors, allowing them to preemptively defend themselves. These signals are often specific, tailored chemical messages that spark specific responses. It's not random, it's sophisticated, coordinated, sometimes astonishingly so. And it's not just between relatives. Trees of entirely different species have been shown to exchange carbon and information. Birch trees and Douglas firs, for example, can send resources back and forth depending on the season. In summer, the birch, with its broad leaves and early growth, might donate extra carbon to the fir. In winter, when the birch loses its leaves, the fir returns the favor. It's a kind of reciprocity that echoes some of the oldest human values. Give when you have and receive when you need. If you could see this underground web, if the soil were suddenly rendered transparent, it would look like a glowing neural network, pulsing with energy, connecting life. A biological internet built not with cables and satellites, but with living tissue and ancient partnerships. And like any network, it has vulnerabilities. Human activity, logging, construction, soil compaction, even planting single-species tree farms can disrupt or destroy these fungal connections. When we remove trees without understanding their role in the network, we're not just taking wood. We're breaking the links in a living system. We're silencing a conversation we barely understand. But in untouched or carefully restored forests, the network thrives. It weaves together not just trees, but the entire ecosystem. Grasses, herbs, shrubs, fungi, insects, all connected, all playing roles. Even animals benefit. The health of the trees directly impacts the animals that feed on their fruits, nest in their branches, or take shelter in their shade. It's a web of life, starting underground and radiating outward in every direction. So while it may look like each tree is growing on its own, a solitary life form reaching skyward, the truth is very different. Each one is part of something larger, a living, breathing collective. A forest that speaks not with words, but with molecules, sugars, and signals that travel through fungal threads, smaller than the eye can see. In that silent exchange beneath the soil lies the true secret of the forest, that it is not made of individuals, but of relationships. Relationships built over centuries, held together by something ancient and invisible. And once you know it's there, you'll never walk through a forest the same way again. Certainly, here is a fully expanded version of Chapter 3, continuing in the immersive narrative style, without headings or chapter markers. This section explores the social life of tree roots and their surprising behaviors. When we picture tree roots, we usually think of them as passive structures, like anchors holding a ship in place. They burrow into the earth, they drink up water, they take in minerals, and that's about it. But that view is outdated and honestly incomplete, because the more we study them, the more it becomes clear roots are not just survival mechanisms. They're social instruments. Beneath the soil, where no eye can see and where time moves slowly, tree roots are constantly reaching out, not just to seek water or nutrients, but to interact with what's around them. They sense, they respond, they adapt, they avoid obstacles and seek opportunities. They can tell who's nearby, and in some cases even who is nearby. Roots, it turns out, have a remarkable sense of touch. When they bump into something, a rock, a worm, another root, they don't just mindlessly grow around it. They pause, they assess, and if it's another root from the same tree, they'll often grow alongside it without much resistance. But if it's a root from a completely different tree, especially one from a competing species, the response can change dramatically. Some roots steer away, others form a sort of barrier. In some cases, they compete aggressively, stealing space, nutrients, or even secreting chemical inhibitors to suppress their neighbor's growth. This behavior is known as allelopathy, a form of chemical warfare that plants have evolved over millions of years. But the really fascinating part begins when the tree recognizes a relative. Yes, roots can distinguish kin from stranger. In carefully controlled experiments, scientists have found that when seedlings are grown next to siblings, trees from the same parent, their roots grow differently than they do around unrelated trees. They're less competitive. They don't hog nutrients or water. Instead, they behave more cooperatively, sharing resources, limiting their own expansion to give others a chance. It's as if, even underground, trees have a sense of family. This discovery has completely changed how ecologists view plant behavior. We used to assume that trees, like most plants, were in constant competition with one another, each fighting for its own patch of sun and soil. But the reality is more complex. Yes, competition exists, but cooperation, particularly among related trees, is surprisingly common. Imagine a forest where roots intertwine, not in battle, but in a kind of handshake, an agreement, a quiet pact to share, to support, to survive together. These root systems can fuse, creating what's called a root graft. Through these grafts, trees can share water, nutrients, and even hormones, chemical messengers that influence growth, healing, and stress responses. Trees with root grafts often live longer and recover from damage more quickly than those growing alone. Sometimes these bonds go even deeper. In places where forests have been logged and the canopy cleared, researchers have found living stumps, tree trunks cut down years ago, with no leaves, no branches, and no apparent means of survival. Yet when these stumps are sliced open, they bleed sap. They're alive. But how? Without leaves, they can't photosynthesize. They should have died long ago. The answer lies in the roots. These stumps are being kept alive by neighboring trees through root grafts. Their former companions, still standing tall, are feeding them, sending sugars and nutrients underground to sustain what's left of their fallen kin. There is no obvious evolutionary benefit for this. It doesn't help the living tree grow faster or taller. It's not a strategy to outcompete others. It appears to be an act of connection, a vestige of a relationship that once was and still, somehow, persists. This level of cooperation invites us to reconsider what we mean by intelligence. If a tree can recognize its kin, modify its root growth to avoid harming a sibling, send help to a stump long after it stopped producing anything for itself, Is that not a form of awareness? Not awareness in the way we think of animal minds, but a different, slower, decentralized intelligence. One that works through networks and signals and shared chemistry rather than through neurons and brains. And remember, this isn't happening in one tree or one forest. This is happening all over the world, wherever trees grow together, in tropical rainforests, in arid savannas, in boreal woods blanketed in snow. Trees are constantly negotiating, adjusting, reaching out. Beneath the forest floor, their roots form a living, shifting web of relationships. They send out scouts, pull back from competitors, lean toward allies, and embrace their kin. They respond to damage, infection, and change. They collaborate with fungi, bacteria, and even some animals. It's a full ecosystem of cooperation, competition, and care. And roots are right at the center of it. We often think of life as a race, survival of the fittest, each species out for itself. And yes, nature can be brutal, but it's also deeply interconnected. Trees don't thrive because they isolate themselves. They thrive because they build networks, because they support one another when they can, because their roots, though silent, speak volumes. So the next time you see a tree swaying quietly in the wind, remember that what's happening below ground may be even more remarkable than what you see above. That tree is not standing alone. Its roots are listening, touching, sensing, reaching. They are part of a hidden conversation that spans meters, acres, even entire forests. What we're discovering now is just the beginning, and yet it's enough to say, with growing certainty, that trees, in every way that matters, live in community. Absolutely. Here's a full, immersive expansion of what would have been Chapter 4. This section dives deep into the concept of the Wood Wide Web, building from previous chapters and continuing the flowing, narrative style with no headings or breaks. For most of human history, we assume trees were solitary, stationary, passive, that their lives began and ended in stillness, that each one lived alone. But as scientists dug deeper, both metaphorically and literally, they began to uncover a story far more intricate, far more astonishing than anyone expected. A story of connection, of communication, of cooperation on a scale so vast and so slow, we missed it for centuries. And at the heart of that story lies something now known as the Wood Wide Web, a term once dismissed as poetic exaggeration, but which turns out to be almost literally true. What makes a forest isn't just the presence of trees. It's the relationships between them. It's the invisible threads that bind them together. These threads, microscopic filaments of fungi called hyphae, form dense, living bridges that stretch from root to root, species to species, tree to tree. When these fungal networks link up with plant roots, they form mycorrhizal associations. But when they link entire forests together in a web of communication and exchange, we begin to glimpse the scale of something far more powerful, something that behaves like an organic internet. The Wood Wide Web wasn't a discovery made in a single flash of insight, but a realization that grew slowly as bits of data piled up into something undeniable. Researchers like Dr. Suzanne Simard, a forest ecologist from British Columbia, played a key role in uncovering the details. In one experiment, Simard injected isotopes, harmless, traceable markers, into the bark of a tree. She wanted to see where those markers ended up. And what she found was startling. Over time, the labeled carbon didn't stay in that tree. It moved underground, through the roots and the fungi, and appeared in nearby trees, including younger saplings that hadn't produced much sugar of their own. In other words, one tree was feeding another, and it wasn't random. Trees sent more carbon to saplings that were genetically related to them, their children, and to others that were shaded and struggling. In some cases, large trees in the sun acted as carbon donors, sending energy to trees in darker patches of forest. This was not competition, this was care. A kind of forest welfare system where energy was redistributed through the underground network. These were not isolated transactions. They were part of a constant, dynamic, and responsive system. The term Wood Wide Web began to stick, and not just because it was catchy. It made sense. This network had all the hallmarks of the internet: nodes, trees, links, fungal threads, packets of information, chemical signals, and a decentralized structure that responded and adapted in real time. Through this system, trees can send warnings, distress signals when under attack by pests or disease. They can transmit excess nutrients to neighbors. They can even shut off supply lines to dying or infected trees, as if quarantining a threat to the whole community. And the fungi don't just act as passive cables. They're active participants. They regulate traffic. They make decisions about how to allocate resources. In many cases, they take a commission of the carbon being transferred, using it to grow and extend their own network further into the forest. This raises an extraordinary question. Who is really in charge? The tree, the fungus, or something in between? A co-created organism made of multiple species, all relying on each other to function. In many ecosystems, a single species of fungus can connect dozens, even hundreds of trees. Some fungi form general partnerships, linking up with many species of plants. Others are specialists, forming exclusive relationships with specific trees. Either way, the result is an underground landscape more densely connected than the streets of a megacity, a kind of mycelial superhighway running silently beneath our feet. And it isn't just about nutrients or defense. The Wood Wide Web plays a role in shaping the forest itself, influencing which seedlings survive, how fast they grow, and how resilient the ecosystem becomes in the face of change. If a forest is hit by drought, the network can redirect water to where it's needed most. If disease spreads, the network can isolate the damage. If a fire tears through the canopy, the surviving roots and fungi beneath the ground can serve as the foundation for regeneration. But like our own internet, the Wood Wide Web has its vulnerabilities. Logging, ploughing, and soil disturbance can tear these networks apart. When forests are clear-cut, the fungal highways are disrupted, and communication stops. In tree plantations, where one species is grown in uniform rows, the lack of diversity often leads to simpler, weaker fungal networks, or none at all. And without these underground connections, the trees are more vulnerable. They're more likely to die in droughts, more likely to suffer pest outbreaks, more likely to grow poorly and die young. That's why old-growth forests matter so much. They aren't just collections of old trees. They are repositories of memory, living archives of relationships, connections, and deeply woven networks that have taken centuries to form. They are places where the wood wide web has grown dense and intelligent, where trees no longer live as individuals, but as participants in a vast, interdependent society. And still, we've only scratched the surface. Scientists now believe that this underground network may even influence tree behavior above ground, affecting when leaves change color, when flowers bloom, and how trees adjust their growth patterns. Some even speculate that the network helps synchronize the rhythms of the forest, like an unseen conductor guiding the tempo of life. It's a humbling realization that for every tree you see standing tall, there's a mirror world beneath it, just as alive, just as complex, and maybe even more important. A hidden network that pulses with information, that learns, that remembers, that responds. One that connects not just trees, but entire ecosystems. And once you know it's there, you can't unsee it. The forest is no longer quiet. It's humming, whispering, alive with signals we've only just begun to hear. So the next time you enter the woods, try imagining the world beneath the soles of your feet. Not dirt, not emptiness, but a glowing web of life, stretching in every direction, binding the forest together in silent unity. It's not just a metaphor anymore. The wood wide web is real, and it's telling us that trees, for all their stillness, are never truly alone. Absolutely. Here's a fully expanded version of what would have been Chapter 5, written in the same immersive, flowing narrative, without headings or chapter breaks. This section explores how trees respond to danger and how they protect not only themselves, but each other. A forest may appear calm, but it is anything but defenseless. Hidden beneath the rustling leaves and the sway of the canopy is a quiet readiness, a kind of biological vigilance. Trees may not run, may not scream, may not bare claws or teeth, but they know when they are under threat. And more surprisingly, they can warn others. Consider a scene that plays out every day in forests around the world. A hungry animal, a deer, an elk, a caterpillar, begins to munch on the tender leaves of a tree. The damage is small at first, a few bites, a torn edge. But to the tree, this is no minor inconvenience. It is an invasion. And what happens next is nothing short of astonishing. Within minutes, the attacked tree begins to respond. Specialized cells near the wound ramp up production of defense chemicals, compounds that make the leaves taste bitter or even toxic. Tannins, alkaloids, and a whole host of secondary metabolites flood the tissues, making the foliage less palatable, and in some cases, actively harmful to the predator. The goal is clear. Make the meal unpleasant enough that the attacker moves on. But the tree doesn't stop there. As the damage continues, it begins releasing volatile organic compounds, airborne chemical signals that drift on the breeze. These molecules are essentially messages, invisible to us, but loud and clear to any tree downwind. If the signal is strong enough, neighboring trees begin to alter their own chemistry preemptively. They produce the same bitter compounds. They brace for the coming threat. It's the equivalent of a tree shouting a warning. I'm under attack. Defend yourselves. This kind of airborne communication has been documented in dozens of species, from acacias in Africa to beeches and birches in Europe. In one famous example, giraffes browsing on a patch of acacia trees caused the leaves to release ethylene gas. Downwind, other acacias picked up the message and rapidly increased the tannin levels in their own leaves, making them unappetizing before the giraffes even arrived. The animals, sensing the change, stopped eating and moved upwind toward trees that hadn't yet received the warning. But the most remarkable part of this story lies underground. Even without wind, even in still, damp air, trees can communicate. Because many of them are connected below the surface by the same fungal networks we explored earlier, the wood wide web. Through these mycorrhizal links, danger signals can travel from root to root, triggering defense responses in trees that aren't physically nearby. It's as if the trees are sending private messages through an encrypted fiber optic line, a silent alarm system, more discreet and sometimes faster than the wind. The content of these signals can be astonishingly specific. In some cases, a tree can distinguish between mechanical damage, like a broken branch, and herbivore damage, where saliva is involved. The chemical signatures are different, and the defensive responses are tailored accordingly. Some signals activate only when the tree recognizes a true predator. And it's not just about predators. Trees under drought stress, fungal attack, or nutrient deficiency also send out signals. They let others know what's happening. Not in words, of course, but in molecules. Sometimes the response is chemical defense. Sometimes it's resource redistribution. A well-nourished tree might send sugars or water to a struggling neighbor through the fungal network. In other cases, the message is simply a warning. Prepare. Conditions are changing. We often reserve the word intelligence for animals that can think, solve problems, or communicate in complex ways. But what do we call a system where an organism senses harm, analyzes its cause, responds internally, and communicates the danger to others in its community? What do we call a being that can distinguish kin from stranger, friend from foe, threat from accident, that can remember past stress and respond more effectively the next time? Trees don't move, but they do act. They don't speak, but they do send messages. They don't run, but they can resist, and they do so collectively. In many forests, these warning systems create ripple effects. A single attacked tree can trigger a wave of biochemical changes that spreads across the forest floor like an invisible tide. Leaf chemistry shifts. Growth slows. Roots adjust their absorption. Sap flows alter. The forest becomes alert, responsive, ready. And unlike most alarm systems, this one doesn't shut off when the danger passes. Trees remember. They prime themselves, much like a human immune system preparing for future infections. A tree that has experienced insect attack in one season may respond more quickly and more forcefully the next time it's under threat. That memory isn't stored in a brain. It's stored in the tree's cells, in the complex dance of hormones and gene expression that shapes how the organism reacts. It's easy to walk through a forest and feel at peace, to believe that it's a place of stillness and calm. And it is on the surface. But below that calm is a web of alertness, readiness, and resilience. Trees don't need motion to be active. They don't need noise to make themselves heard. Their form of vigilance is quiet, chemical, and ancient. There is something profoundly moving about this. The idea that the forest isn't just a collection of individuals, but a community that watches out for each other, that senses when something is wrong that passes along knowledge, that prepares, defends, and even sacrifices when necessary, and that, in the face of injury or threat, does not simply wither or yield, but fights back, with tools that have evolved over millennia. It challenges our view of plants as passive. It invites us to see them as something more, as beings with agency, with strategies, with relationships, perhaps even with a kind of awareness, not the awareness of thought or language, but the awareness of response, of cause and effect, of presence and change. And once you start to see it, the forest no longer looks the same. You begin to notice the silence isn't empty, that the trees around you are alive, not just biologically, but socially. You start to imagine the warnings drifting on the wind, the messages traveling below your feet, the quiet defenses being prepared with every passing hour. The trees are not still, they are listening, they are speaking, they are watching out for one another, even when no one else is. Of course, below is an expanded, immersive version of what would have been Chapter 6, seamlessly continuing the narrative. This section explores how forests care for their young, focusing on tree parenting and support for saplings, a theme that further deepens the idea that trees live in community and look out for one another. Beneath the canopy of towering trunks and branches, where light is dappled and the forest floor stays cool, tiny saplings begin their long, slow journey toward the sky. Most of them will never make it. They will be outcompeted, shaded out, stepped on, gnawed at, or simply fail to thrive. In a dense forest, the odds are stacked against the young, and yet some survive, not because they are stronger or luckier, but because something or someone helped them along the way. It turns out that trees are not indifferent to the next generation. Quite the opposite. Many species of trees, especially those growing in stable, old-growth forests, display a quiet but powerful form of parenting. The elders don't just drop their seeds and leave the rest to chance. In many cases, they continue to nurture their young, long after the seeds have germinated, long after the saplings have sprouted. They do it through light, through root connections, and most astonishingly, through underground networks that transport energy and information directly from parent to child. Picture a mother tree, an old, towering individual who has stood for centuries. Her roots stretch wide and deep. Her crown filters the sunlight above, and her presence shapes everything beneath her. She produces seeds, of course, sometimes hundreds, sometimes thousands. But she does more than simply propagate. She supports. She shares. Through the mycorrhizal networks in the soil, the mother tree sends carbon, a form of energy, to the saplings growing in her shadow. These young trees can't photosynthesize much on their own because her branches block much of the sun. Left unsupported, they would starve in the dim light, never growing tall enough to reach the canopy. But instead of competing with them, the mother tree helps them survive. She sends sugars and nutrients through the fungal highways, delivering sustenance where it's needed most. This isn't charity, it's strategy, deeply rooted in evolutionary success. The survival of her kin helps preserve the genetic strength of the forest, but it also seems to be more than that, because trees have been observed supporting not only their direct offspring, but even unrelated saplings when the ecosystem is healthy. These nutrient flows can be precise. Studies have shown that when a mother tree is connected to multiple saplings, she distributes more carbon to those that are genetically related. It's as if she recognizes her own children and prioritizes their needs. This recognition, doesn't happen through vision or scent, but through biochemical signaling, subtle cues that trees and fungi can detect, allowing them to distinguish kin from stranger. And the parenting isn't just about food, it's also about protection. Young trees, still soft and vulnerable, are particularly susceptible to drought, disease, and physical damage. But when connected to mature trees through the wood wide web, they benefit from the resilience of the entire network. If a drought strikes, water can be redirected through the fungal links from deeper roots to those nearer the surface. If pests or pathogens are present in one area, warning signals can be relayed in time to allow nearby saplings to activate their chemical defenses. The mother tree becomes a kind of guardian, not in the emotional sense we associate with animals, but in the practical, enduring sense of biology. Her strength sustains others. Her memories of past stress are passed on, not in stories, but in chemical patterns that prepare the young for what's to come. And even in death, her role continues. When a mother tree begins to die, whether from old age, disease, or storm damage, she doesn't simply fade away. Before the final collapse, she begins offloading what she has left. Carbon, nutrients, signaling compounds. All of it flows downward and outward into the surrounding roots. In the last season of her life, she enriches the soil and fortifies her connections to the younger trees nearby. She lets go slowly, deliberately. It is not a fall. It is a final act of giving. And when she finally drops, her trunk crashing to the forest floor in a thunderous, moss-softened thud, her body becomes a nursery. The decaying wood holds water, minerals, and microbes. Fungi move in, moss creeps over the bark. Insects burrow, and in the rotting husk of what once was, a new generation takes root. Saplings grow directly out of her body. Life blooms from death. These nurse logs, as ecologists call them, are not merely accidents. They are essential features of healthy forest ecosystems. Without them, many saplings would never get the moisture and nutrients they need to survive the critical early years. These fallen trees aren't waste, they are legacy. They are bridges between generations. They are memory, slowly returning to the earth. There's a humility to the way trees raise their young, a recognition that no individual survives alone. Growth is slow, help is required, and nothing is truly wasted. Even in stillness, there is contribution. Even in death, there is support. We often imagine nature as a place of constant competition, of winners and losers, of survival at all costs. But the more closely we study forests, the more that story begins to soften. Yes, competition exists, but so does cooperation, so does care. And in the case of tree parenting, we find something rare in the plant world, a long-term commitment to the well-being of the next generation. A tree's version of parenting doesn't involve cuddling or feeding by hand or guarding a nest. It doesn't involve eyes or touch or song, but it does involve sacrifice. It involves resource sharing. It involves risk. A tree that sends carbon to a sapling is giving up energy it could use for its own growth, its own seeds, its own survival. It is a gamble, one that may not pay off for decades. But the forest seems to bet on togetherness, and that bet, over thousands of years, has shaped some of the most resilient, biodiverse ecosystems on Earth. Forests where life persists, not because it is alone, but because it is surrounded by a web of quiet, constant care. A world where even the tallest trees remember where they came from and help those just starting the journey skyward. Certainly. Below is the fully expanded version of what would have been Chapter 7. It continues the immersive narrative style without headings or breaks, exploring how trees form relationships with fungi, not just as passive hosts, but as active partners in one of the most important and ancient alliances in nature. Beneath the roots of every forest lies another world, darker, older, and arguably more powerful than the forest above. It is a place where roots intertwine with long thread-like strands of fungi. This hidden universe, stretching for miles in every direction, isn't just a support system. It's a partnership, a mutual agreement struck long ago between two kingdoms of life, plants and fungi. To truly understand trees, you have to look beneath them. You have to follow their roots into the soil, where they meet the vast web of mycorrhizal fungi, so called because of the Greek words myx, fungus, and rhiza, root. These fungi are not occasional visitors or opportunistic parasites. They are ancient allies. Their relationship with trees stretches back more than 400 million years, far older than the forests themselves. It began with a need. When the first plants left the water and colonized land, they faced a problem. The soil was there, but the nutrients were hard to reach. Phosphorus, nitrogen, water, all essential for growth, but locked away in complex compounds. Fungi, with their ability to break down organic matter and mine minerals from rock, had the tools plants lacked. And the plants, in turn, had something fungi couldn't make on their own, sugars, the result of photosynthesis. So a deal was made. The fungi wrapped around the plant roots, or even pierced them, and began to trade. Carbon flowed one way, nutrients and water flowed the other. It was one of the most successful biological collaborations in Earth's history, and it continues today, quietly shaping every forest on the planet. In modern trees, the relationship is no less remarkable. The fine filaments of mycorrhizal fungi, known as hyphae, spread out into the soil like a second root system. In fact, they can extend a tree's reach by up to 700 times, finding water in dry periods, scavenging rare minerals, and passing them back to the tree in exchange for sugar. The fungi are not freeloaders. They work hard, and they are rewarded. This exchange is not random. Trees can regulate how much carbon they send to their fungal partners, rewarding the most helpful ones and starving out those that don't deliver enough nutrients. It's a kind of biological marketplace, a barter economy rooted in mutual benefit. And like any economy, it is shaped by context. In rich soils, trees may invest less in fungi. In poor soils, the partnership becomes critical and the flow of carbon increases. But the most fascinating aspect of this relationship goes beyond nutrient exchange. Because through this fungal network, the wood wide web, trees don't just trade, they talk. Signals pass through the hyphae like messages through a telegraph. A tree stressed by drought may trigger a response in its neighbors. A sapling under attack by insects may cause a nearby elder to increase its own defenses. Fungal networks transmit not only chemicals, but electrical pulses, primitive but measurable. They are not nerves, but they are something close. And it's not just trees that benefit. The fungi use the trees as well, not just for food, but as bridges. Some species of fungus connect not one tree, but dozens or hundreds. They span the forest floor, linking pines to maples, oaks to beeches, elders to saplings. They allow species that never touch branches to share information and energy. They blur the line between individuals. It would be easy to imagine the fungi as servants, conduits that trees use for their own purposes. But that would be a mistake. In many cases, it's the fungi that choose which trees to connect. They may preferentially link certain individuals. They can even block signals in some situations. They are not passive wires. They are active participants. Some mycorrhizal fungi are incredibly selective, forming tight partnerships with only one or two tree species. Others are generalists, networking across entire ecosystems. Some operate shallowly in the leaf litter and upper roots. Others dive deep, connecting taproots and ancient soil layers. Together, they form a layered, three-dimensional network, a living web that shifts and responds to seasons, stress, and opportunity. This network doesn't just transmit resources, it redistributes them. A tall tree in full sunlight might produce more sugar than it needs. Through the fungal web, it can send that excess carbon to shaded individuals nearby, sometimes related, sometimes not. The fungi, like brokers, decide how much goes where. In some cases, trees recovering from stress receive more. In others, old trees support the young. It's not charity, it's community. And sometimes, it's control. Because fungi can influence tree behavior. Certain fungi seem to suppress immune responses in their host, making the tree more tolerant of their presence. Others affect root architecture, causing the tree to grow in certain directions. Some may even trigger hormonal shifts that affect leaf growth or flowering time. The fungi aren't just helpers, they are co-authors of the forest's story. In return, the trees shape the fungal world. They select which species thrive beneath them by controlling sugar allocation. They can favor one fungus over another. And when a tree dies, its fungal network doesn't vanish immediately. It continues to exist, decaying slowly, passing information and nutrients to the surrounding trees. In some cases, the death of a tree can cause an entire fungal species to disappear from an area. Their fates are intertwined. This deep interconnection has given rise to a radical idea in ecology, that a forest is not simply a collection of individual trees, but a superorganism, a system in which each part depends on the others, where trees and fungi together form a kind of meta-being, capable of sensing, responding, and adapting as a whole. And the more we study this network, the more it challenges our assumptions. Trees are not solitary competitors fighting for sunlight. They are members of a vast cooperative, aided by unseen fungal allies. Their success is not measured only in height or girth, but in how well they are connected, how deeply they are embedded in the living web beneath their feet. It is a reminder that nature does not always favor the loudest, or the fastest, or the most aggressive. Sometimes it favors the most connected, the most attuned, the most generous. To walk in a forest, knowing all this, is to see a different world. You begin to imagine the lines of communication stretching beneath the soil. You wonder what messages are passing beneath your steps. You see fungi not just as mushrooms after rain, but as the living threads that hold the ecosystem together. And you realize something else. The forest doesn't end at the edge of the clearing. It extends underground, across roots and rock, past bone and burrow, in a silent, breathing network older than memory, more patient than time. The trees are not alone. They never have been. Absolutely. Here is a full-length, deeply immersive version of what would have been Chapter 8, seamlessly continuing the narrative. This section explores how trees warn each other of danger, sharing signals across vast distances and revealing the quiet intelligence of the forest. In the stillness of the forest, it's easy to imagine that nothing is happening. Trees seem motionless, passive, silent. We walk among them and think of them as scenery, but this impression is wrong. Beneath the stillness is a constant, vibrant flow of information. A tree, when under attack, does not suffer quietly. It sends a warning, and other trees, upon hearing it, change their behavior. This capacity to warn, to recognize threat and respond, suggests a kind of forest awareness that science has only recently begun to understand. Imagine a grove of acacia trees on the African savanna. One day, a giraffe begins to feed on the leaves of one tree. The moment the acacia senses damage, something remarkable happens. It floods its leaves with bitter tannins to make them unpalatable. At the same time, it begins releasing ethylene gas, a volatile airborne chemical. This gas drifts on the breeze to nearby trees, and within minutes, those neighbors, who haven't yet been touched, begin to increase their tannin levels as well. They're not reacting to the giraffe. They're reacting to the message. It's a chemical alarm. Danger is here. Prepare yourself. This is not just a curious side effect. It's communication. The trees are detecting molecules in the air and altering their internal chemistry accordingly. They are making decisions, not with neurons or brains, but with complex biochemistry honed over millions of years. And the phenomenon isn't limited to acacias. Across the world, in vastly different ecosystems, trees have evolved similar signaling systems. A willow under attack by caterpillars emits volatile organic compounds that nearby willows detect. Those willows respond by producing bitter or toxic compounds in their leaves, making themselves less appetizing. Maples, poplars, beeches, even conifers like pines and spruces, all have been observed engaging in this silent warning system. But not all communication is airborne. Some trees, particularly those in mature, interconnected forests, use underground networks to signal one another. When a Douglas fir is attacked by insects, for example, it not only produces airborne distress signals, but also sends warning compounds through its roots, which are then carried by mycorrhizal fungi to other trees nearby. These underground alerts can travel farther than the wind and are unaffected by direction or weather. What's even more astonishing is that trees don't send the same message every time. Their warnings are specific. If a tree is damaged by insects, it produces one set of compounds. If it's wounded by mechanical means, like a broken branch or human interference, the chemicals are different. If it's infected by a fungus, different again. The receiving trees respond accordingly. They're not just reacting to damage, they're interpreting context. In some cases, trees may even respond differently depending on who sends the signal. Research has shown that trees are more likely to share information with genetically related neighbors, siblings, offspring, or members of their own species. The signals still work across species, but the strength and speed of the response can vary. This suggests a subtle, context-aware intelligence, a forest that not only communicates, but prioritizes. And the benefits of this communication are not merely theoretical. Trees that receive early warning signals often survive insect infestations or fungal outbreaks better than isolated individuals. They ramp up their internal defenses, producing more resin, more tannins, more antifungal compounds. They may close their stomata to reduce infection risk. They may even alter the timing of leaf drop or bud burst to avoid synchrony with certain pests. All of this happens without movement, without eyes, ears, or mouths. But it is, undeniably, a form of language, a chemical language with its own vocabulary and grammar. One of the most intriguing discoveries in this area is the forest's ability to remember. After an initial attack, some trees retain a kind of biochemical memory of the event. If the same threat returns weeks or months later, they respond faster and more forcefully. This is called priming, and it functions much like an immune memory in animals. The tree, in a sense, has learned. That learning can even be passed on. Seeds from trees that have survived intense pest pressure often carry epigenetic markers that make their seedlings more responsive to warning signals. The offspring are more alert, more ready. The memory of danger is passed not just between individuals, but across generations. What does this mean for the forest as a whole? It suggests that trees, when linked by roots, fungi, and shared airspace, function as a kind of collective intelligence, not in the way humans do, not with thought or language as we know it, but with decentralized information sharing and adaptive behavior. One tree suffers, the others respond. The whole forest becomes more resilient, and sometimes the warning signals go far beyond chemical compounds. Some studies suggest that trees emit tiny electrical impulses in response to physical damage, slow pulses that travel through the phloem tissue in the trunk. These impulses are not fast like animal nerve signals, but they carry information. They trigger hormonal changes, defensive responses, and systemic shifts in the tree's physiology. Some scientists have begun referring to these pulses as plant action potentials, a hint at a nervous system of sorts. This possibility, that trees not only react, but sense and anticipate, challenges our assumptions. We are used to thinking of intelligence as a mammalian feature, bound to brains and neurons. But nature doesn't limit itself to one blueprint. The forest's intelligence is spread out, distributed, cooperative. It doesn't reside in one individual, it lives in the connections. So when we walk through a forest, we are walking through a living, listening world. Every snapped twig, every falling pine cone, every footstep is felt. Not as pain or emotion, but as data. The trees may not feel fear, but they respond to threat. They may not speak, but they warn. They may not think, but they remember. And they do not do this alone. Each signal sent from tree to tree is an act of solidarity. A reminder that in the deep time of the forest, survival is not about outgrowing your neighbor. It's about listening. It's about warning others when the bark beetles come. It's about preparing your offspring for what lies ahead. It's about staying rooted, not just in the soil, but in a community of awareness. What we call silence is full of signals. What we see as stillness is laced with vigilance. And what we thought were solitary giants turn out to be guardians of one another, whispering danger through the ground, through the air, through a language we are only beginning to understand. Certainly, below is an extended, immersive exploration of what would have been Chapter 9, continuing in the same poetic and narrative style. This part delves into how trees share resources, not just in times of abundance, but especially in times of hardship, revealing a system built not solely on competition, but on cooperation and resilience. In the human world, we often speak of nature as a battlefield, a realm of endless competition where only the strongest survive. But in the forest, something softer is also true. Beneath the towering trunks and dense canopies, there is a quiet generosity. Trees do not always hoard what they have. In times of stress, in seasons of scarcity, they share. This sharing isn't abstract. It's not symbolic. It's literal. Molecules of carbon, nitrogen, and water passed from one tree to another, sometimes across long distances, through roots and fungal filaments. A healthy tree in the sun may send some of its hard-earned sugar to a shaded sapling struggling in the understory. An old, dying tree may send its last nutrients to the younger generation before it falls. Trees give to one another, and they do so with purpose. The mechanics of this sharing are astonishing. Deep underground, trees are connected by a vast and complex network of mycorrhizal fungi. These fungi form intricate threads that penetrate the soil, winding into tree roots and forming a living bridge between individuals. Through these threads, some thinner than a human hair, but stretching for kilometers, trees can transfer carbon compounds, essential minerals, and even water molecules. But why would a tree give away its precious sugar? Photosynthesis is energy intensive. Why not keep it all? The answer lies in the deep interdependence of the forest. Trees in dense, mature forests are rarely isolated individuals. Most are members of long-standing networks, some with their own kin, others with unrelated neighbors, and they benefit when the whole system is stable. If a sapling in the shade dies, the forest loses a future canopy. If a tree weakened by drought collapses, nearby trees become more exposed to sun and wind. The health of one affects the many. And so, in certain situations, trees redistribute their resources. A mother tree, typically a large, older individual with an expansive root system, may send nutrients to her offspring nearby. Experiments have shown that carbon and nitrogen flow more frequently between related trees than unrelated ones. The young receive not just structural support from the canopy above, but biochemical support from the roots below. This maternal behavior is not sentiment, of course. It is strategy. The mother tree invests in her genetic legacy, helping her seedlings survive in the dim light of the forest floor. But even between unrelated trees, sharing occurs. It's not based on kindness, but on ecology. In a tightly knit forest, mutual support often yields higher survival for all. One of the most compelling examples of this sharing occurs in forests under threat. During a drought, for instance, trees that have deep roots and better access to water will often transfer moisture to their thirsty neighbors via the underground network. Scientists have measured water moving from well-hydrated trees to dehydrated ones, not just passively, but in a directed flow through shared fungal connections. These transfers can mean the difference between life and death. Likewise, when a tree is under attack by insects or disease, it may divert more carbon to its fungal network, which can then nourish nearby trees that are still healthy, effectively reinforcing the front line. The forest responds as a collective, shifting resources to where they are needed most. It's an emergency system, a lifeline, a form of solidarity written in molecules. Even dying trees have something to give. As they lose the ability to photosynthesize, they begin to release stored nutrients into the network. not randomly, but in measurable flows to nearby trees. In some cases, these transfers continue until the dying tree is little more than a hollow shell, having given everything it had. It doesn't matter that the tree is falling. What matters is that the forest endures. This redistribution isn't just about altruism. It's also about efficiency. Trees produce sugar, but they can't use it all at once. Fungi, hungry for carbon, act as brokers, channeling excess sugar from one tree to another that needs it more. In exchange, the fungi receive nutrients from the soil, which they offer back to their plant partners. The result is a feedback loop that balances supply and demand across the ecosystem. But the system isn't without hierarchy. Trees that give more tend to have more connections in the fungal network. They become hubs, not just biologically, but informationally. These hubs play a stabilizing role, helping younger or weaker individuals survive storms, droughts, or infestations. When a hub tree dies, its loss is felt throughout the forest. The network contracts. Its capacity to share diminishes. Some scientists have even suggested that the death of too many hub trees, through logging, fire, or disease, can destabilize an entire forest. The community loses its memory, its wisdom, its ability to adapt. The network is also dynamic. Trees can shift their giving and receiving depending on season, age, and need. A young tree may receive more in its early years, but eventually it will become a donor. A species that dominates one area may support another species elsewhere. These exchanges form a web of interdependence far more complex than we imagined. A web shaped not just by biology, but by cooperation. Perhaps most remarkable is the idea that some trees remember who helped them. In controlled experiments, trees that had once received carbon from a neighbor were more likely to return the favor later. The fungal network is capable of storing biochemical signatures, allowing trees to recognize past interactions. This is not memory as we know it, but it is something close, a kind of social currency, a history written in sap and root. All of this points to a deeper truth. In the forest, success is not solely about being the tallest or the strongest. It's about being connected, being part of something larger, and being willing to give when others are in need. So the next time you find yourself in a quiet woodland, take a moment to imagine what lies below. Imagine the carbon flowing from one tree to another, the nitrogen drifting like invisible threads, the water pulsing through hyphal veins, the dying tree nourishing the living, the strong supporting the weak, the whole forest breathing together, bound not just by biology, but by generosity. Because in the end, the forest is not a collection of individuals, it is a society, complex, responsive, and deeply cooperative. And its survival depends not just on light and rain, but on the quiet decisions trees make every day to give, to receive, to share. Absolutely. Here's a fully expanded, richly detailed version of what would have been Chapter 10, continuing the immersive style. This chapter explores how trees and plants use sound and vibration to communicate, revealing yet another layer of hidden connection beneath the forest canopy. The forest is alive with sound, but not just the songs of birds or the rustle of leaves in the wind. Beneath the surface, beneath what we can hear with our ears, there is a subtle world of vibration and sound, one that trees themselves produce and perceive. It is a silent symphony, a language of frequencies and pulses, vibrating through wood and soil, connecting one tree to another in ways we are only beginning to understand. Trees may seem still, but they are constantly moving at microscopic levels. Cells expand and contract, water flows through vessels, and tiny structures within the wood resonate like strings on an instrument. These movements create vibrations, some too faint for human ears, others in frequency ranges that animals can detect. Scientists now know that trees don't just passively experience these vibrations. They actively generate and respond to them. One of the most fascinating ways trees use sound is through what is called cavitation, a phenomenon that happens when water moves through a tree's xylem vessels, the tiny tubes that carry water from roots to leaves. During drought or stress, air bubbles can form and collapse, creating minute clicks and pops inside the tree. These sounds, though inaudible to us, might serve as signals of stress, warning neighboring trees through shared fungal networks or soil vibrations that water is scarce. But this is just the beginning. Recent research has uncovered that some trees actually emit ultrasonic sounds when stressed. Experiments recording these emissions found that dry or drought-stressed plants produce high-frequency clicks and pulses, sounds above the range of human hearing, but potentially detectable by other organisms, including insects and perhaps even other plants. Could these ultrasonic emissions serve as an alarm system, a call for help, or a way to trigger defensive behaviors in neighbors? Moreover, trees and plants have mechanoreceptors, sensors that detect mechanical forces such as touch, wind, or vibration. When a tree senses movement, it reacts at the cellular level, altering growth patterns or triggering chemical defenses. In this sense, trees listen to their environment through vibration. When neighboring trees sway in the wind or are touched by animals, those mechanical cues can ripple through the forest, allowing a form of communication that is tactile rather than verbal. Some researchers propose that trees can even detect the footsteps of animals approaching, allowing them to preemptively increase their defenses against herbivores. This is not a matter of hearing as we know it, but sensing vibrations traveling through the soil or air. The ability to hear in this way offers a fascinating window into a sensory world far beyond our own. In addition to these natural vibrations, trees can also influence the acoustic environment of a forest. The shape and arrangement of branches, leaves, and trunks affect how sound waves travel, amplifying or dampening noises. This creates a living soundscape where communication can be enhanced or obscured depending on the structure of the forest. It's a form of bioacoustics, the interplay between biology and sound, that shapes how animals and plants interact. Some cultures have long known about this hidden sound world. Indigenous peoples often speak of the forest as a place alive with voices, not just of animals, but of plants themselves. They recognize that trees respond to touch, to movement, even to music. In some traditions, songs and rhythms are used to encourage growth or healing in plants, suggesting an intuitive understanding of the vibrational language of life. Science is now catching up. Experiments have shown that plants can respond to certain sound frequencies by growing faster or producing more nutrients. Specific vibrations can stimulate root growth, alter hormone levels, or increase resistance to pests. Although the mechanisms are still under investigation, it's clear that sound and vibration are powerful factors in plant physiology and ecology. Beyond individual trees, this vibrational communication may have broader ecosystem effects. Insects and fungi that associate with particular trees may detect ultrasonic or mechanical signals, guiding their behaviors and interactions. The entire forest may be engaged in a complex dance of sound, touch, and chemical messaging. a multi-sensory network that sustains life in a dynamic balance. Imagine standing quietly in a forest, feeling the subtle vibrations in the earth beneath your feet, sensing the whispers of trees sharing news of drought or insect attack, or detecting the soft hum of fungal networks weaving below. It's a world where silence is never empty, and every movement carries meaning. The discovery that trees communicate through sound and vibration challenges our traditional notions of intelligence and awareness. It suggests that perception is not confined to brains or ears, but is distributed throughout living tissues, using physical forces as messages. Trees, it seems, are listening, speaking, and responding in a language both ancient and mysterious. This vibrational communication is another reminder that forests are not mere collections of individuals, but interconnected communities. They are ecosystems of sensation, response, and cooperation. Each vibration carries a story of survival, of warning, of growth, woven into the living fabric of the forest. So next time you walk through a woodland, pause to listen, not just with your ears, but with your body. Feel the pulse of life beneath the soil, the gentle sway of branches, the quiet clicking of sap and water moving within the trunks. In this world of vibration, trees speak. And if we learn to listen, they have much to tell us. Of course, here's a deeply detailed, immersive expansion of what would have been Chapter 11, continuing the narrative flow seamlessly. This section explores the remarkable world of tree memory, learning, and adaptation, showing how trees remember events and prepare for future challenges without brains or neurons. Trees live lives measured in decades, centuries, sometimes millennia. In their slow, steady existence, they face countless challenges: droughts that parch the soil, storms that snap branches, insects that chew leaves, fungi that invade roots. Yet somehow, these silent giants manage not just to survive, but to anticipate, adapt, and respond more effectively over time. This capacity to remember past stresses and prepare for future threats is a form of learning, a kind of memory encoded in their cells and chemistry. Unlike animals, trees lack brains and nervous systems. They have no synapses or neurons to store memories in the way humans do. Instead, their memory is biochemical and structural. It is written in the patterns of gene expression, the distribution of hormones, the accumulation of defensive compounds, and even changes in cell walls. When a tree experiences stress, say a drought or insect attack, it triggers a cascade of molecular events that leave lasting marks within its tissues. This process is known as priming. When a tree is primed by a previous encounter with a pest or environmental challenge, it doesn't have to start from scratch the next time. Instead, its cells are on high alert, producing defensive chemicals faster and mounting a quicker response. Primed trees may close their stomata more rapidly to conserve water, increase resin production to deter beetles, or ramp up antifungal defenses before infection takes hold. This heightened state of readiness can persist for months, even years, allowing the tree to survive repeated assaults more effectively. But how does a tree remember to do this? The answer lies in epigenetics, the regulation of gene activity without changes to the underlying DNA sequence. Stress signals can alter which genes are turned on or off, and these changes can be stable over long periods. Chemical tags called methyl groups attached to the DNA or associated proteins, modifying how genes behave. In essence, the tree's genome is annotated with stress history, shaping future responses. Epigenetic memory is even passed to new cells as they grow, allowing the tree to maintain a state of preparedness throughout its life. This molecular record helps the tree adapt to fluctuating environments, building resilience not through individual consciousness, but through living chemistry. Even more astonishing is the evidence that some of these epigenetic changes can be passed to offspring. Seeds produced by stressed trees may carry epigenetic markers that influence seedling development, making the next generation more resistant to drought, pests, or disease. In this way, memory extends beyond the individual tree, becoming a legacy written in the very fabric of the forest. Trees also learn through their interactions with the fungal networks underground. These mycorrhizal connections don't just transport nutrients and signals. They may also facilitate a form of communal memory. When one tree in a network experiences a pest outbreak, the warning signals it sends can prime neighboring trees to respond preemptively. The fungal network acts as a kind of shared information highway, spreading learned experience through the forest community. This shared memory is not fixed but dynamic. Trees can adjust their responses based on changing conditions, sometimes even reversing prime states when threats subside. This flexibility allows them to balance defense with growth, ensuring survival over long timescales. In addition to molecular memory, trees record environmental history in their very structure. Tree rings, the concentric layers visible when a trunk is cut, provide a physical archive of growth conditions. Wide rings indicate favorable years of warmth and moisture. Narrow rings signal drought or cold. Scientists use these rings to reconstruct centuries of climate history, but for the tree itself, these layers represent more than time. They encode past experiences, scars from wounds, and even chemical changes locked within the wood. Some species even alter their leaf chemistry seasonally based on past exposure. For example, a tree that has endured heavy insect herbivory one year may produce leaves with more bitter or toxic compounds the next. This learned adjustment helps reduce damage in future growing seasons. The capacity for memory and learning in trees challenges traditional ideas about intelligence. We tend to associate memory with brains and nerves, but trees demonstrate that complex information processing can happen without these organs. Their biological memory is slower, more chemical, and more distributed, but no less effective. This memory is a kind of wisdom, accrued not in moments but in years, shaped by the slow rhythms of life and death, growth and decay. It allows trees to navigate a world of uncertainty, to anticipate changes, and to cooperate with their neighbors. In a way, the forest as a whole holds a collective memory, a shared history of droughts, fires, pest outbreaks, and recovery. Each tree's memory contributes to this larger archive, creating a living chronicle that sustains the ecosystem through time. When we consider this, it becomes clear that trees are not static or passive organisms. They are active participants in their own survival, capable of sensing, responding, and remembering. They learn from experience, pass on lessons to their descendants, and share knowledge with their community. Their memory is slow and subtle, but it is a form of intelligence, a testament to life's resilience and ingenuity. It invites us to rethink what it means to be sentient, to be aware, and to remember. In the end, the memory of trees is a story of survival written in the language of molecules and cells, etched into wood rings and leaves, transmitted through networks both above and below the ground. It is a story of quiet endurance, deep connection, and the enduring wisdom of life itself. Absolutely. Here's a richly detailed, expansive version of what would have been Chapter 12, flowing naturally and without headings. This chapter explores the hidden social lives of trees, how they recognize and prefer kin, form alliances, and create communities shaped by family ties and cooperation. When we think of social creatures, we usually imagine animals, wolves hunting in packs, primates grooming one another, birds singing to establish bonds. But beneath the leafy canopy, trees too live social lives, though theirs are quieter, slower, and woven through roots and fungi rather than gestures and voices. One of the most fascinating discoveries in forest ecology is that trees can recognize their relatives, favor their kin, and build communities based on these family ties. The idea that trees could recognize kin was once met with skepticism. After all, trees seem solitary, rooted in place, and disconnected from each other by distance and soil. But decades of research have shown that trees can indeed differentiate between relatives and strangers, and they respond differently depending on who is nearby. In experiments where seedlings were grown close to either siblings or unrelated individuals, researchers observed striking differences in behavior. Seedlings growing near kin tended to cooperate, growing their roots in a more complementary way to avoid competing directly for the same resources. In contrast, when near strangers, they grew more aggressively, competing for nutrients and space. This suggests that trees have a mechanism to recognize genetic relatedness and modulate their growth accordingly. How do trees recognize their kin? The exact mechanisms remain partly mysterious, but chemical signaling seems to play a crucial role. Trees release a variety of chemicals through their roots and leaves: volatile organic compounds, root exudates, and mycorrhizal network signals, which can carry information about their genetic identity. Neighboring trees smell these signals in the soil or air, allowing them to assess whether those nearby are family. The fungal networks underground amplify this social connection. These mycorrhizal fungi form vast interconnected webs that link the roots of many trees, creating what some ecologists call the wood wide web. Through this network, trees exchange nutrients, hormones, and chemical signals, sharing information about their health, environment, and even their kinship. This web is not just a nutrient conduit, but a social platform. Trees can allocate more resources to their relatives, supporting their growth and survival. In one remarkable study, mother trees were observed to transfer sugars preferentially to their offspring rather than to unrelated neighbors. This investment in kin enhances the survival chances of their genetic lineage, much like animals caring for their young. But kin recognition goes beyond immediate family. Some species form clonal colonies where genetically identical trees spread underground through roots or runners, creating interconnected groves that can cover large areas. These clonal forests are essentially one organism made up of many stems, a collective with shared resources and coordinated growth. In such systems, cooperation and resource sharing are paramount, since all parts share the same genetic interests. The social behavior of trees extends to defense as well. When a tree is attacked by herbivores or pathogens, it sends chemical distress signals through the fungal network to its kin. These relatives respond by ramping up their own defenses, producing bitter compounds, thickening bark, or closing leaf pores, in anticipation of the threat. This early warning system benefits the whole family group, reducing damage and increasing survival. Interestingly, trees may even discriminate among kin based on the degree of relatedness, favoring close relatives over distant ones. This selective cooperation shows that trees have evolved sophisticated social strategies to maximize their fitness in complex environments. Social trees also influence the composition and structure of entire forests. Kin groups tend to cluster, creating pockets of genetically related individuals that shape the dynamics of competition and cooperation. These clusters affect everything from seed dispersal patterns to susceptibility to pests, ultimately influencing biodiversity and ecosystem stability. The existence of social networks among trees challenges the old view of forests as mere assemblages of competitors. Instead, forests are intricate societies where alliances form, favors are exchanged, and family ties matter. Trees are not isolated individuals struggling alone. They are neighbors, partners, and kin navigating the challenges of life together. This social dimension adds a new layer to our understanding of forest ecology. It reveals that cooperation, recognition, and altruism, concepts once thought unique to animals, are alive in the plant kingdom. Trees share resources, communicate threats, and support their relatives, building communities that endure through generations. This kinship-based cooperation also carries important implications for forest management and conservation. When we cut down trees indiscriminately, we disrupt these social networks and weaken the resilience of the ecosystem. Protecting kin clusters and allowing natural social dynamics to continue is essential for maintaining healthy, vibrant forests. In many ways, the social lives of trees remind us that life is interconnected not only by competition, but by care and cooperation. Through their roots and fungi, their chemical whispers and nutrient gifts, trees build communities rooted in family and mutual support. So the next time you walk through a forest, remember that the silent giants surrounding you are not just passive organisms. They are social beings, recognizing friends from strangers, favoring family, and building relationships that sustain their world. The forest is alive with connection, not just in the branches above, but deep in the tangled roots below. A living testament to the power of kinship and cooperation. Certainly, here's a long, detailed expansion of the content that would correspond to Chapter 13, smoothly flowing without headings. This chapter dives into the mysterious ways trees and plants can sense and respond to environmental cues beyond what we usually imagine, including light, touch, gravity, and even chemical signals from their surroundings. Trees and plants inhabit a world filled with constant change. They are rooted in place, unable to move away from threats or unfavorable conditions, yet they thrive by being extraordinarily perceptive. Their survival depends on their ability to sense and respond to countless environmental cues. Subtle signals that humans often overlook or cannot detect at all. This sensory awareness allows trees to adapt their growth, behavior, and defenses to the shifting conditions of their habitat. Light is perhaps the most obvious environmental cue for plants. Trees have evolved sophisticated systems to sense the quality, intensity, and direction of light, guiding their growth toward optimal conditions. Specialized photoreceptors embedded in their cells detect different wavelengths of light, from ultraviolet to visible to far red. This allows trees to distinguish between sunlight and shade, triggering responses such as elongating branches toward the sun or adjusting leaf orientation to maximize photosynthesis. But trees do not just respond to light passively. They actively perceive changes in light caused by the presence of neighboring plants. When a tree detects a shift in the ratio of red to far red light, a sign that other plants are nearby and competing for sunlight, it initiates a process called the shade avoidance response. This triggers rapid stem elongation, leaf angle changes, and sometimes early flowering, all designed to outgrow competitors and capture more light. This remarkable sensitivity helps trees manage competition in crowded forests. Beyond light, trees also sense mechanical stimuli with incredible precision. They detect wind, rain, animal touch, and even the pressure of other plants growing nearby. These mechanical signals influence growth patterns and structural reinforcement. For instance, trees exposed to frequent wind develop thicker, more flexible trunks and stronger root systems, a phenomenon known as thigmomorphogenesis. This ability to feel their environment enables trees to prepare physically for stressful conditions. Touch is another vital sense. Trees can detect the presence of climbing vines, grazing animals, or neighboring branches through direct contact. When a tree senses touch, it may respond by altering growth to avoid damage or by producing defensive chemicals that deter herbivores. These tactile responses help trees maintain their integrity and optimize resource allocation. Gravity is a constant force that trees must contend with. They rely on a process called gravitropism to orient their roots downward and their stems upward. Specialized cells called statocytes contain dense starch granules that settle under gravity's pull, signaling the direction of growth. This allows trees to maintain proper posture and stability, even as they grow tall and wide. Chemical sensing is perhaps the most complex and fascinating aspect of tree perception. Trees constantly release and receive chemical signals through their roots, leaves, and bark. These chemicals convey information about nutrient availability, pest attacks, environmental stress, and even the presence of other organisms. When roots detect a nutrient-rich patch in the soil, they grow toward it, guided by gradients of chemical compounds. Similarly, roots can sense toxic substances or unfavorable pH levels and avoid those areas. This chemical taste for the soil allows trees to optimize nutrient uptake and avoid harm. Trees also perceive airborne chemical signals, including volatile organic compounds, VOCs, released by other plants. When a neighboring tree is attacked by insects, it emits specific VOCs that travel through the air, warning nearby trees to activate their defenses. This airborne chemical communication is a vital part of the forest's interconnected defense network. Microbial interactions provide yet another sensory dimension. Trees sense and respond to the presence of beneficial mycorrhizal fungi and nitrogen-fixing bacteria in the soil. Through chemical signals, trees encourage these symbionts to colonize their roots, enhancing nutrient uptake and resistance to disease. In turn, microbes respond to the tree's signals, creating a dynamic partnership essential for forest health. Even the changing seasons are sensed with precision. Trees detect variations in day length, temperature, and moisture, triggering physiological changes such as leaf shedding, bud dormancy, and flowering time. These seasonal rhythms are finely tuned to local environmental cues, allowing trees to anticipate and prepare for winter cold or summer drought. What's truly astounding is how all these sensory inputs are integrated within the tree's tissues. Although trees lack a central nervous system, they possess complex signaling networks involving hormones like auxins, cytokinins, ethylene, and jasminates. These hormones transmit information from one part of the tree to another, coordinating growth, defense, and adaptation in a harmonious response to external stimuli. For example, when a tree is wounded by an insect, chemical signals rapidly travel from the damaged leaves to the roots and other parts of the tree, triggering defensive compound production and strengthening cell walls. This systemic response is akin to an immune system, mobilizing the tree's resources to protect itself. In many ways, trees perceive the world through a multisensory network that surpasses simple stimulus-response reactions. They constantly gather data from light, touch, gravity, chemicals, and microbial partners, processing this information over hours, days, and even years to shape their development and survival strategies. This sensory sophistication highlights the remarkable adaptability of trees. Rooted and immobile, they have evolved to become masters of perception, detecting the slightest changes in their environment and responding with resilience and grace. Their senses enable them not only to survive, but to thrive in diverse ecosystems, from dense rainforests to arid savannas. Understanding the sensory world of trees deepens our appreciation for these silent sentinels of nature. It reveals that beneath their calm exterior lies a vigilant awareness, a continuous dialogue between tree and environment that shapes the forest's dynamic life. Next time you find yourself among trees, take a moment to consider how much they perceive. The dance of light and shadow, the brush of wind, the chemical whispers in the soil. In these quiet perceptions, trees embody an intelligence both ancient and vital, a testament to life's incredible capacity to sense and adapt. Certainly, here's an extended, detailed expansion for the content of Chapter 14, seamlessly flowing without headings. This chapter explores the fascinating concept of tree communication, not just as isolated organisms, but as dynamic participants in a vast, interconnected forest network, sharing information and even helping each other survive. When we walk through a forest, the towering trees might seem like solitary giants, each silently occupying its own patch of earth. But beneath that tranquil surface lies a vibrant web of interaction and communication that rivals the complexity of any animal society. Trees talk to each other, warn one another of danger, share resources, and even form alliances to ensure their mutual survival. This secret social life, hidden from casual view, transforms the forest into a living, breathing network of cooperation and information exchange. At the heart of this communication are chemical signals. Trees release a variety of compounds into the air and soil, each carrying messages that other trees can detect and respond to. When a tree is attacked by herbivores, whether caterpillars, beetles, or aphids, it can emit volatile organic compounds, VOCs, that drift through the air like a distress signal. Neighboring trees smell these airborne chemical cues and immediately begin to bolster their defenses, producing bitter toxins, thickening leaf cuticles, or increasing resin flow to deter potential attackers before they arrive. This kind of early warning system is crucial for forest survival, as it allows trees to prepare proactively rather than reacting passively after damage has occurred. But communication is not limited to the air. Underground, a far more intricate and ancient network of exchange exists, woven by symbiotic fungi known as mycorrhizae. These fungi colonize tree roots, extending their filaments like an underground internet, connecting the roots of multiple trees across species boundaries. Through these mycorrhizal networks, trees can share water, nutrients, and chemical signals. This underground web not only enhances nutrient uptake, but also serves as a conduit for information flow. When one tree is stressed by drought, disease, or pests, it can send chemical messages through the fungal network that trigger defensive responses in neighboring trees. Scientists have observed astonishing behaviors facilitated by these fungal connections. For example, older mother trees in a forest often supply younger seedlings with extra carbon and nutrients, helping them establish in shaded or nutrient-poor environments. This nurturing behavior suggests a level of cooperation that defies the traditional view of trees as strictly competitive individuals. The mother trees essentially act as hubs of the network, supporting the next generation and maintaining forest stability. Moreover, these fungal networks facilitate a kind of social communication that helps trees identify kin from strangers. Trees tend to share resources preferentially with relatives, an evolutionary strategy that maximizes the survival of shared genes. This selective sharing supports the development of family clusters within the forest, strengthening kin groups through mutual aid and defense. In this way, the forest community is structured not just spatially, but genetically, with networks of cooperation built on familial ties. Communication among trees also involves electrical signaling. Although trees lack nervous systems, they can transmit electrical impulses along their tissues in response to injury or environmental stimuli. These signals can move rapidly through the plant, triggering the production of defensive chemicals or activating repair mechanisms. Electrical signaling adds another layer to the forest's communication toolkit, allowing rapid information exchange that complements slower chemical messages. This complex system of communication challenges the old notion of plants as passive organisms. Instead, trees actively engage with their environment and neighbors, forming dynamic networks of interaction that resemble a social community. The forest becomes a living network of cooperation where information flows continuously and individuals respond not just for themselves, but for the collective good. These discoveries have profound implications for how we think about forests and their conservation. Forests are not merely collections of individual trees, but interconnected communities that rely on communication and cooperation to thrive. Disrupting these networks through deforestation, soil disturbance, or pollution can have cascading effects, weakening the resilience of the entire ecosystem. Understanding tree communication encourages us to see forests in a new light, as complex societies bound by invisible threads of information and mutual support. It invites a sense of respect and stewardship for these ancient networks that sustain life on our planet. In a world where human activity increasingly isolates us from nature, The interconnectedness of trees offers a powerful reminder of the value of connection, collaboration, and shared survival. The language of the forest, spoken through chemicals, fungi, and electric impulses, is a testament to the intelligence and adaptability of life itself. Next time you wander among trees, pause to imagine the silent conversations taking place beneath your feet and overhead, the signals exchanged, the warnings sent, the resources shared. You are walking through a living network where every tree is both a messenger and a listener, a solitary being and a connected neighbor. This hidden communication is one of nature's greatest marvels, a silent symphony of cooperation that has sustained forests for millions of years and will continue to do so long after we are gone. Certainly. Here's a fully expanded, richly detailed version of what would be Chapter 15, flowing naturally and without any headings. The world of trees is not only shaped by their interactions with each other, but is deeply influenced by the countless animals that inhabit the forests alongside them. From tiny insects to large mammals, the relationship between trees and animals forms a complex web of mutual dependence and influence that shapes entire ecosystems. Trees provide food, shelter, and breeding grounds for animals, while animals play critical roles in pollination, seed dispersal, pest control, and nutrient cycling. This dynamic interplay is a cornerstone of forest health and biodiversity. Birds are among the most visible animal partners of trees. Many tree species depend on birds to carry their seeds far and wide, ensuring the spread of their offspring into new habitats. Birds consume fruits and nuts, digest the fleshy parts, and then deposit seeds through their droppings, often at considerable distances from the parent tree. This seed dispersal process reduces competition among seedlings and promotes genetic diversity. Different bird species specialize in dispersing different types of seeds, forming intricate mutualistic relationships with specific trees. Mammals, too, are vital collaborators in this dance. Squirrels, for example, are well known for gathering and burying nuts like acorns and walnuts. While many of these cached seeds are eventually retrieved and eaten, some are forgotten or left behind, allowing new trees to sprout. Larger mammals, such as deer or elephants, browse on leaves, fruits, and bark, affecting tree growth and forest structure. In tropical forests, elephants serve as ecosystem engineers by creating clearings that allow sunlight to reach the forest floor, enabling the growth of young trees and maintaining biodiversity. Insects, though small, wield enormous influence. Pollinators like bees, butterflies, moths, and certain beetles visit flowers to collect nectar and pollen. In the process, they transfer pollen from one flower to another, enabling fertilization and fruit production. Many trees rely exclusively on specific insect species for pollination, making these tiny creatures indispensable for forest regeneration. Conversely, some insects can be destructive herbivores, feeding on leaves, stems, or roots, challenging trees to develop defenses, and sometimes triggering complex chemical signaling within the forest. Fungi and microorganisms also deserve mention as integral partners in this community. Mycorrhizal fungi form symbiotic relationships with tree roots, enhancing nutrient and water uptake while receiving carbohydrates in return. Some fungi decompose fallen leaves and dead wood, recycling nutrients back into the soil and sustaining the growth of living trees. Without these decomposers, forests would quickly become clogged with organic matter and lose fertility. The interactions between trees and animals extend beyond the immediate physical benefits. They influence the evolution of traits in both groups. For instance, the bright colors, scents, and nutritional contents of fruits have evolved in response to the preferences and behaviors of animal dispersers. Trees with seeds that appeal to effective dispersers are more likely to propagate, shaping the characteristics of future generations. Animals, too, evolve adaptations to exploit tree resources effectively. The shape of bird beaks, the digestive enzymes of mammals, or the foraging strategies of insects can all reflect coevolutionary pressures exerted by trees. This evolutionary interplay creates a tightly woven fabric of interdependence and balance. However, human activity increasingly disrupts these delicate relationships. Habitat loss, fragmentation, and pollution threaten animal populations essential to tree reproduction and forest maintenance. When key pollinators or seed dispersers decline, tree regeneration suffers, leading to altered forest composition and reduced resilience. In some cases, invasive species upset established relationships, introducing new competitors or predators that destabilize these ecological partnerships. Understanding the vital roles animals play in forest ecosystems encourages more holistic conservation approaches. Protecting trees means also protecting the animals that support their life cycles, and vice versa. Conservation strategies that preserve corridors for wildlife movement, restore degraded habitats, and manage forests with biodiversity in mind are crucial for sustaining these complex webs of life. Ultimately, the story of trees and animals is a story of cooperation and coevolution across millions of years. It is a testament to the power of interdependence and the beauty of natural communities where every organism, large or small, plays a part in sustaining the whole. When you next wander through a forest, notice the birds flitting among the branches, the squirrels darting on the ground, or the buzzing of insects near flowers. Remember that these creatures are not just visitors or bystanders. They are essential partners in the survival and flourishing of the trees around you. Together, they form a living network of life, thriving through connection and collaboration. Absolutely. Here's an extensive, flowing expansion for what would be Chapter 16, with no headings, focusing on the resilience of trees and forests in the face of environmental challenges and their remarkable strategies for survival and recovery. Trees and forests are often seen as symbols of strength and permanence, standing tall for decades, centuries, and even millennia. Yet they live in a world that is constantly changing, exposed to storms, droughts, wildfires, insect outbreaks, diseases, and human impacts. What makes trees truly remarkable is not just their longevity, but their incredible resilience, their ability to endure, adapt, and recover from adversity. This resilience is built on a combination of physical adaptations, intricate biological processes, and complex community dynamics that together enable forests to survive disturbances and regenerate over time. At the individual level, trees have evolved an array of strategies to withstand environmental stresses. One of the most obvious is their tough, protective bark. Bark acts as a shield, guarding the delicate inner tissues against physical damage, extreme temperatures, and invading pathogens. Some species develop thick, corky bark that can protect them from the intense heat of wildfires allowing them to survive and re-sprout afterward. Others produce chemical compounds in their bark and leaves that deter insects and fungi, or slow their spread if infection occurs. When a branch is broken or a wound opens, trees have the remarkable ability to compartmentalize damage. They isolate injured tissues by creating barriers of specialized cells that prevent decay and infection from spreading deeper into the trunk. This biological triage helps contain damage and preserve the tree's vital systems. Over time, trees grow new layers of wood and bark around wounds, effectively healing and strengthening themselves. Roots are also essential for resilience. They anchor trees firmly in the soil and absorb water and nutrients, but they can also store energy reserves in the form of carbohydrates. During droughts or periods of stress, when photosynthesis slows down, these stored resources allow trees to maintain vital functions and even produce new shoots when conditions improve. Many trees also develop extensive root systems that enable them to access deep water sources unavailable to other plants. Some species have evolved the ability to reproduce vegetatively, sending up new shoots from roots, stumps, or even fallen branches. This form of clonal regeneration allows trees to bounce back after damage, even if the original stem has been destroyed. In certain ecosystems, this strategy helps forests recover quickly after fires or storms, maintaining continuity in the community. On a larger scale, resilience is a property of the entire forest ecosystem. Forests are dynamic communities that constantly change and evolve in response to disturbances. When a mature tree falls, it creates a gap in the canopy that allows sunlight to reach the forest floor. This gap triggers a wave of growth as seedlings and understory plants seize the opportunity to flourish. Over time, these young trees grow up to replace the older generation, renewing the forest in a natural cycle of death and rebirth. The species composition of forests also shifts in response to environmental pressures. After disturbances, pioneer species, often fast-growing and sun-loving, quickly colonize open spaces, stabilizing the soil and creating conditions that favor the return of slower-growing, shade-tolerant species. This process, called ecological succession, can take decades or centuries, but ultimately leads to a mature, stable forest community adapted to local conditions. Biodiversity plays a crucial role in forest resilience. Diverse forests with many species are better equipped to withstand pests, diseases, and climatic fluctuations because the impact on one species is less likely to cascade through the entire ecosystem. This diversity also promotes complementary interactions among species, such as nutrient cycling, pollination, and mutualistic partnerships, which enhance the forest's ability to recover and adapt. Climate change presents new challenges for tree resilience. Increasing temperatures, altered precipitation patterns, and more frequent extreme events put stress on forests worldwide. Some species may struggle to survive in their historic ranges, while others may expand into new areas. Trees have shown remarkable plasticity, adjusting their phenology, such as the timing of leaf out and flowering, to changing conditions, but rapid changes can outpace their ability to adapt. Forests also respond through migration over generations, as seeds disperse and seedlings establish in new, more favorable habitats. However, fragmentation of landscapes and human barriers like roads and cities can impede this natural movement. making conservation and connectivity critical to maintaining forest resilience. Human activities can both undermine and enhance forest resilience. Unsustainable logging, land conversion, pollution, and introduction of invasive species weaken forests and make them more vulnerable to disturbances. Conversely, restoration efforts, protected areas, and sustainable forestry practices can support recovery and maintain the vital functions of forest ecosystems. Fire, once feared as purely destructive, is now understood to be a natural and essential force in many forest ecosystems. Certain tree species depend on fire to open cones, clear underbrush, and recycle nutrients. Managing fire regimes carefully is crucial to maintaining forest health and resilience. Ultimately, resilience is not just about surviving damage, but thriving in a changing world. Trees embody resilience through their slow but steady growth, their ability to adapt physiology and behavior, their partnerships with other organisms, and the dynamic communities they form. They remind us that life is persistent and interconnected, capable of enduring adversity through adaptation and cooperation. Next time you see a towering tree, consider the many storms it has weathered, the fires it has survived, and the seasons it has endured. Its presence is a testament to resilience, a living story of endurance and renewal that stretches back through time and will continue into the future. Absolutely. Here's a comprehensive, richly detailed expansion of what would be Chapter 17, presented as continuous text without headings. Trees are far from the solitary beings we might imagine. Beyond their physical connections and chemical conversations, many trees engage in a remarkable form of cooperation that challenges our understanding of competition in nature. In fact, trees often form alliances and support networks that benefit entire communities, working together in ways that sustain the forest as a whole. This cooperation can be seen in how they share resources, assist one another through stress, and collectively respond to threats, revealing a hidden social life within forests. One of the most striking examples of this cooperation is the way trees exchange nutrients through the underground fungal networks known as mycorrhizae. These fungi connect the roots of multiple trees, sometimes even linking different species, creating a vast web that facilitates the movement of water, carbon, nitrogen, and other essential nutrients. This exchange is not random. Trees can preferentially share resources with those in greater need, such as seedlings struggling to establish themselves in shaded or nutrient-poor areas. By providing extra carbon or minerals, mature mother trees nurture their younger relatives, enhancing the resilience and diversity of the forest community. This kind of support transcends simple survival strategies. It's a sophisticated system of mutual aid that bolsters the health of the forest as a whole. When a tree is under attack by pests or experiencing drought stress, it can send warning signals through the mycorrhizal network. Neighboring trees respond by ramping up their own defenses, producing chemical compounds that deter herbivores or reduce water loss. In this way, the forest functions almost like a cooperative society where individuals look out for one another, improving the chances of collective survival. Cooperation extends above ground as well. Trees growing in close proximity can adjust their growth to minimize competition and maximize collective benefit. For example, branches may grow in complementary patterns to avoid shading one another, ensuring that each tree receives sufficient light for photosynthesis. Leaf angles can be optimized to capture sunlight efficiently without creating excessive shade for neighbors. Such spatial adjustments suggest a level of awareness and responsiveness that allows trees to coexist peacefully rather than compete ruthlessly. In addition, trees can share information about environmental conditions beyond immediate threats. Seasonal cues, such as changes in temperature and moisture, can be synchronized among neighboring trees through chemical and hormonal signals. This coordination helps entire groves prepare for upcoming challenges like frost or drought, enabling them to enter dormancy or conserve resources collectively. This synchronization is essential for the timing of biological events like flowering and seed dispersal, which often rely on coordinated efforts to ensure reproductive success. The idea of cooperation also challenges traditional ecological models that emphasize competition as the dominant force shaping plant communities. While competition for resources undoubtedly occurs, cooperation reveals an equally important dynamic, one that promotes stability, diversity, and resilience. This balance between competition and cooperation allows forests to maintain their complex structures and functions over time. Human observation and experimentation have shed light on these cooperative behaviors through a variety of studies. For instance, experiments where trees are grown in mixed species groups often show improved growth and survival rates compared to monocultures. This suggests that diversity and cooperation go hand in hand, enhancing the health of forests and their ability to withstand stresses. Forest managers and conservationists increasingly recognize that preserving and restoring natural cooperation networks is crucial for sustainable forestry and ecosystem resilience. Understanding tree cooperation also has profound philosophical implications. It invites us to reconsider our perception of nature as a battleground of relentless struggle. Instead, it reveals nature as a community where collaboration and mutual support are fundamental. This insight can inspire new approaches to environmental stewardship, emphasizing interconnectedness, empathy, and the value of nurturing relationships, not just among humans but across all living beings. The social life of trees, with its networks of shared resources, communication, and mutual aid, invites us to imagine forests as living communities, complex societies where cooperation is a key to survival. These silent alliances have evolved over millions of years, shaping the evolution of trees and the ecosystems they support. So when you stand beneath the canopy of a forest, consider the invisible threads that link one tree to another, the shared lifelines of nutrients, signals, and support. Each tree is both an individual and part of a greater whole, thriving not in isolation, but through connection and cooperation. The forest, far from being a mere collection of plants, is a vibrant community sustained by generosity, resilience, and shared life. Of course, here's a deeply expanded and flowing version of what would be Chapter 18, written as continuous text without headings. As we come to reflect on the intricate world of trees and their hidden lives, it becomes clear that forests are not just collections of wood and leaves. They are living communities bound together by complex networks of communication, cooperation, and resilience. This interconnectedness reveals a new perspective on what it means to be alone or together in nature. Trees, though rooted in one place and silent to our ears, are part of vast social systems where no individual truly stands isolated. Their survival depends on relationships, shared resources, and a constant exchange of information that links them to their neighbors and to the ecosystem at large. The idea that trees are never really alone challenges us to rethink our understanding of life on Earth. We tend to imagine life as a competition where each organism strives to outdo the others for light, water, and nutrients. While competition does exist, it is only one part of a much richer story. Cooperation, communication, and mutual support play equally crucial roles in sustaining forests. Trees share what they have, warn each other of danger, nurture the young, and build networks that support not only themselves, but entire communities of plants, fungi, animals, and microorganisms. This web of life is dynamic, adaptive, and astonishingly sophisticated. By recognizing the social lives of trees, we also recognize the importance of preserving the integrity of forests. When forests are cut down, fragmented, or degraded, it's not just the loss of trees we mourn, it is the loss of a complex, living system of relationships. The underground network severed, the communication disrupted, and the cooperative bonds broken. Such losses diminish the resilience and health of ecosystems, making them more vulnerable to further damage from climate change, pests, and disease. Protecting forests, therefore, means protecting these invisible connections, the very lifeblood of the ecosystem. This understanding also calls for a shift in how we approach forestry, conservation, and land management. Instead of viewing trees as isolated units or mere resources, we must appreciate them as integral parts of a social network. Practices that maintain diversity, minimize disturbance to soil and fungal networks, and promote natural regeneration help sustain the community life of forests. Restoration efforts that re-establish connectivity, both above and below ground, enable forests to heal and thrive. Indigenous knowledge and long-term observations have long recognized these relationships, offering valuable insights into managing forests sustainably. On a deeper level, the notion that trees are never alone invites us to consider our own place within nature's networks. Like trees, humans are social beings who rely on connections and communication to survive and flourish. The forest teaches us about cooperation, patience, and resilience. It shows us that strength often lies not in solitude or dominance, but in relationships, whether through sharing resources, supporting the vulnerable, or responding collectively to challenges. As we face global environmental crises, these lessons become more urgent and relevant than ever. In our fast-paced, technology-driven world, the slow, silent communication of trees might seem distant and obscure. Yet, by tuning into their stories, by walking among them with curiosity and respect, we can reconnect with the rhythms of life that sustain all living beings. We learn to appreciate timescales beyond our own lifetimes, cycles of growth and decay, and the profound interdependence that links roots underground to leaves in the sky. Trees are teachers of patience, reminding us that growth and healing take time. They show us how diversity creates strength, how networks create resilience, and how life is a collective journey. They also inspire awe and wonder, opening our minds to the mysteries beneath our feet and above our heads. So next time you find yourself near a tree, pause for a moment. Imagine the world it inhabits, A world where it is never truly alone, but part of an elaborate community, constantly sharing, supporting, and communicating. Think about the countless interactions happening beyond your sight, and how this connectedness sustains the forest and, ultimately, all life on Earth. In recognizing that trees are never really alone, we come to see the forest not just as a place of quiet beauty, but as a vibrant, interconnected society. It is a living testament to the power of connection and the enduring bonds that weave together the tapestry of life. And through this understanding, we might find new ways to live more harmoniously with nature, honoring the unseen networks that support us all, standing together, never truly alone.